was like a few months ago. I'm driving and I'm listening to YouTube. I'm listening to Jehudi Mahat. Subscribe to Jehudi Mahat. There's two Jehudi Mahats. I might subscribe to both of them, but I'm mainly listening to one of them. This is from one of his videos where he annotated a debate with Danny, who I know from the Dagger Squad, and a few other people, Dane Calloway, and it's about, are African Americans really African? Like one of those debates that's been in the rotation recently. Now, on that debate, I'm from the side of there may be, I would bet there was some pre-Columbian travel and all that. I'd go there. But I've noticed that the people on the Aboriginal side, they seem to be prideful beyond understanding who the real enemy is. And I don't want that pride to rub into the people they're debating with and against, because that isn't a good thing. And just listen to, I'm going to show two examples. One is from a recent call on the Sonnetter by this guy saying he was Aboriginal. And another one is from that video I was listening to in Jehudi Mod. So I'm going to play that one first, the Jehudi Mod video. And notice he annotates this because he has a clear side in his mind. So he's annotating it, making fun of the Aboriginal dude. And because I'm kind of in between, and I say kind of because that's changing when I see how radical and prideful some of these people are making the Aboriginal argument are. Like, they are way farther than where I'm at. Where I'm at, put it like this, I think the best argument for African Americans not being as African per se is made by Real History WW, because they're dealing with black Europeans coming to this country, which is something that we don't really count well at all. So he's looking at something, and he's actually counting. He's using the census. And even with him, I see him as having an element of pride, like wanting to be the smartest black person and not the smartest person, which is needed. Black power requires a thrive of mastery to be the smartest people. Amos Wilson, I saw a video where he summed that up real quick. If you look up Amos Wilson and mastery, he makes the argument, I don't really have to say it again, like, I'd encourage you to look up that video, Amos Wilson and mastery. I don't know if that'll pop up with just that search. Let me test it out and see. While I'm testing that out, I'm just going to play this clip from the Jehudi Mahat video, and I'm going to search that and get back with you.
An independent group.
So, hold on, Lex, I know the story. You gotta read it. I was explaining to you. Tell me if I'm inconsistent or wrong. That is a fact. But then you have to account for the fact that this man named Cyrus Bustill was one of the founders of WELL, and he was a Quaker. And then what I would do, I'm not at home right now, but then I can present to you the Constitution or the records for the Free African Society, which in fact explains to you in their own words the history and why they did it, because it was so much contention. Contention is this: Richard Allen was a Methodist, right? Absalom Jones was under the Anglican Church. He founds the African Church later. They did not agree on what they wanted to do as far as religion, because Cyrus Bustill was a black Quaker, Absalom Jones was an Episcopal minister, and like you just read, Richard Allen's under Methodism. So they decided they still wanted to help their black people in Philadelphia. Why? Because they were suffering, just like you said. So they threw religion, as far as having a religious society, out of the window and established what are called mutual aid and benefit societies.
The reason why that's wrong is because there are They can't. Well, hold on. Let him respond and let him respond.
Okay,
let him respond.
That's how it go. That's how it go.
Danny just refuted when he said McIntosh told us we was African. So Danny just put that. He just destroyed that. We've been saying we've been Africans for 200 years now. It wasn't because of McIntosh and Andrew Jackson.
Because an African said that he was African?
All right, hold on. This is what I was trying to pull up.
That doesn't make sense.
Because my computer was froze, right? Since I was bringing up all of the mutual aid societies, but since he brought that on my screen, is their constitution written by them.
Can you read the first lines?
It says, whereas Absalom Jones and Richard Allen, two men of the African race.
Stop. What did they wrote that themselves? Can you read that again and I won't interrupt you?
Whereas Absalom Jones and Richard Allen, two men of the African race.
What was this written again? I'm sorry. What was this article written? I'm sorry.
No, it's not the article.
No. What was the article that you're reading?
There's something wrong with you, boy. You got a problem.
It's not an article. Listen, hold on. Slow down, brother. This is their constitution of their free Africans. This is not an article. This is a historical document. It's not an article. The sources is here.
Where is it located?
Where is what located?
It's actually Solomon. It's located. You could probably find an original copy right down in the library company, right down Philly, which is right next to the Philadelphia Historical Society. That's where they're probably located. Okay?
Where are you reading it from?
Some people are really fucking stupid.
I am reading it right here.
This don't make.
Hold on, bro.
Okay, so if we pull up some native stuff, what is that?
No.
Let's get.
They got Chinese societies too.
Everybody, please let Alan read this article, please.
Hey Lex, what it's going to do is what you just mentioned about the religious stuff is going to address what I just said in this.
Okay.
Whereas Absalom Jones and Richard Allen, two men of the African race, who were for their religious life and conversation, have obtained a good report among men. These persons form to the love of the people of their complexion, whom they beheld with sorrow because of their irreligious and uncivilized state. Often commune together upon this painful and important subject in order to form some kind of religious society. But there being too few to be found under the like concern, and those who were different in their religious sentiments. With these circumstances, they labored for some time. So it was proposed, after a serious communication of sentiments, that a society should be formed without regard to religious tenets.
Say it again. With what?
Without regard to religious tenets, provided the persons lived an orderly and sober life in order to support one another in sickness and for the benefit of their widows and fatherless children.
Okay, so they were unorthodox.
No.
Nigga, you got to be crazy.
No, they had a religion. Lex said they were preachers. They had religion.
Yeah, they had religion.
Hold on, brother.
Corporation was a 501c3.
It was not a
That's the same
501c3. It's not created. Just stop with that, brother. Come on.
What's
it's
the point?
Not.
What is the point? That's
Okay, great question. The point is, you guys are saying that nobody called themselves African at this point. You guys are saying that people.
Dude, that's a new article. That's not an original document. That was written by some white people. No.
This guy is fucking stupid.
I'm not gonna let y'all talk over. Listen, you read what you said, so let's respond to it. That's a new fucking article.
No, it's not, man. Could you just look at this?
No, it's bullshit. Hey, that dude didn't call himself a goddamn African. I can bet you that.
Look at my screen.
That's a goddamn lie. How about that?
I know it.
Look at my screen.
We debunk you niggas all the time with this African shit.
Hold on, Lex.
What makes you ashamed of being black?
Hold on, y'all. Hold on.
Let me talk to Lex.
Hold on, Lex.
Hold on.
Lex, while we have this confusion, can you also look up the African Society for Mutual Relief?
It's right here.
Another name with
It's
African
on my screen. Hold on. Everybody look at what
Another
he's doing.
society.
Hey, is Lucia African too, brother? Is Lucia African?
We're not talking about Lucia.
Is Naya African?
Why are y'all cutting us off? If you ask for
Hold on, y'all. Let him get it out. Listen, hold up, y'all. Let me tell you something. Let him get it out because honestly, this doesn't.
What's going on? That society is called African, not the people.
Good extent, a person who's not headed for mastery, let us say, essentially is interested in learning what as against how, you see. And to a great extent, then his approach to knowledge is passive. And he's more or less, he becomes more interested in memorizing and remembering what is told him. And he's learning more to take orders than he is to give orders, you see. And to a great extent, many of our so-called educated blacks, our very highly educated blacks, have still been educated in that mode. So you go to, and unfortunately, many of us go to school to get a job, for instance. We don't perceive it as a part of a massive effort to attain control and mastery of our situation and ultimately to outdo the European. You see, one of the major problems we have as a people is, and one of the major functions, let us say, of Eurocentric psychology and sociology and history and so forth, has been to convince non-white people of the invincibility of white people. To convince us that the white man is not capable of being defeated, that he cannot assume his minority position in the world as he is. This being the case then, and it has made us then think, well, we have to accommodate him. We have to get along with him. No, he's going to, you know, we have to live with them because they are in control and so forth. Well, that leads to a type of attitude toward learning. That means that you are not going to try to outlearn him, outthink him, outmaneuver him, you see. So if you're going for mastery, you see, then the knowledge becomes very important and you see it as a tool for advancing your own power interests in the world. If you're not going for mastery, you just see it as a means of being able to carry out efficiently the orders that are handed down. It also limits creativity because if we are to defeat the European, if we are to master this earth and take back this earth from the European, then we must outthink the European.
I couldn't find the video. Let me put my mic up. Put my mic back up. So I had to go to where it was on Facebook and put it back, put it up. I wonder, do you understand how they correlate? Why one video made me think of the next? Because I'm hearing that debate. The Dane Calloway dude, and what I'm not seeing from the Aboriginal side is an acknowledgement or even an openness to the possibility of new knowledge, that you can go back further than the time they were claiming, because they have this conspiracy that it's that African Americans didn't call themselves African until there was like a meeting of the minds and say, okay, we're going to label these people African. So they're showing examples of when they did, and the rebuttals to those are hot-headed and pride-based because they're trying to be smarter or mastered, and, you know, to apply it to the video, they're trying to have that knowledge gain among this clique, not the world. Because if it's the world, this isn't really a debate, because both sides have enough to where we ought to be listening and building something bigger to deal with the world. And really, this is more, not even so much the world, it's to strengthen ourselves to deal with the world, sort of indirectly, because this is about our history. Who are we? And I'm not seeing that from the indigenous crowd. I'm seeing to the point where I can't disagree with accusations of self-hate. Like I'm not one to make those because I'm not going to jump inside somebody's head. But there was just too much that wasn't accurate. The claim that it was a 501c3, anything, the claim that it was a Christian organization, a Christian society, not people identifying themselves as such. And they have more than one source. And then the dude turns into, how about that girl? Well, nobody called themselves African. How about that? Like, really? You're not trying to be masters of the planet. It's just those African Americans that were fooled by this, and I have my sources, and it's a battle of who's right instead of who's wrong, instead of just being right. Winning the argument instead of just being right. Because like I said, I think I could have done a better job of arguing that a portion of our ancestry is indigenous than these sounding like cultist people do. I'm going to show you another example of somebody, and I'm going to talk about that. Well, actually, I'm just going to play the audio. This is from Sonnetter. This is a caller who called into Sonnetter, and then he engages in Ak. And I see the same kind of hot-headedness coming from this other dude. I think he calls himself the unconscious one. And I'd like to ask again, all these people that have hundreds of videos, how many of your videos, this is to everybody, are you challenging white supremacy directly, where you are exposing a albino that's classified as white?
Since you won't, but we can go further though. I mean, let me ask you a question though too. Are you familiar with like a removal?
No, I'm dealing with Zephyr right now. This is what
we already talked about that. All right, we just paid.
No, we ain't get off that yet.
He didn't say they was. Hold up. He didn't say they was Mongoloid. He said it was. He said Lucia was a Negro. So what other people? Hold up. What other people do they call Negroes? Us. So that's
Walter Leeds. Hold on. EVES, anthropologist at the University of Sao Paulo, suggests that its features strongly resemble Australian Aboriginal people. So we got two different scientists, right? And they're trying to reach conclusions. This is the point I'm making. You jumped off on a bandwagon with the Negroid feature, right? I'm just saying they're coming up with different aspects of what it is. Then we got to move on. You know what I'm saying?
I got another one for you.
Later.
I got another one for you.
Later on.
I got one for you.
Just saying. Listen.
I got one for you that you haven't spoke of. You
Frank Williams. Frank Williams.
What about James Chatter? What about Dr. James Chatter?
What about Dr. James Chatter?
What about
Dr.
James? Okay, but listen, you just spoke. Now let me say something.
Yeah,
Dr. James Chatter is an anthropologist and an archaeologist. I gotta admittedly say this. I'm not an anthropologist or archaeologist, and neither are you. Okay. So now we have to go.
But I have been on archaeological digs.
So hold up. But listen. Why would Dr. James Chatter go so far? Dr. James Chatter. You can look him up. Dr. James Chatter. It's CHATTER. CHATTER. Okay, Dr. James Chatter.
CHATTER. Got you, Dr. James. And he's what?
No, let's get it correct. TTER.
Got you, Chatter.
It's TTER. So check it out. So Dr. James Chatter, who has his own anthropologist lab and his own research, right? He said himself that the oldest relics over here resemble Africans, Australians, and South Pacific Islanders. Now let's go further on
that.
But the reason
listen, bro. I'm not disagreeing. I look at James Chatter's work. I'm not disagreeing with that doctor on what they look like. No, I'm not. You won't get me on that one.
Okay. All right.
So
I got some more for you. I got another one for you. All right, so we can go in this one. We can go in the monthly record of anthropology and science.
He's a forensic anthropologist. I just want to note for the record.
Say what?
He's a forensic anthropologist and an archaeologist and a paleontologist. I mean, he studied bones, he studied forensics, and he studies archaeological sites.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Okay. I mean, that makes him more accredited than anybody we know, right?
No, because Anthony Broad is also an archaeologist. Rick Kittles is a geneticist, so I do know people.
Rick Kittles said 0.1% of your blood goes back to 5-6 different countries in Africa. DNA is a fraud. Your man,
okay,
Rick Kittles is a fraud. Your man Rick Kittles is a fraud. He's telling you it was only for entertainment purposes. No, because you saying this, if people is watching, if people is really taking DNA tests.
Listen, I didn't want to get you. You just jumping off, changing the conversation. Can we just stay where we at? Okay, it's evident you don't like Rick Kittles. Not a problem. Although that's
not evident I don't like him. It's not that I don't like the brother. The brother is deceiving us.
Hold on. Why are you funny when the black person has his own language?
You see what I mean? They're not really. This is not a good look, indigenous people. This is not a good argument. This is weaker than I expect, and it's because they're going all in, like all or nothing. He even saw that earlier before he was talking to Ankh. That's Ankh in the background. And this is a guy, I think he introduced himself as something like the unconscious one. Bunch of subscribers and everything. And I really want to get into what he said about Rick Kittles, but let me first say this guy also called in and he was saying that the Peruvian pyramids were older than the Egyptian pyramids. And when they wanted a source, he was going to Before It's News, the same site that reported a new race of demons. And that's what I mean. The problem is they're trying to, it's like they got new information and they want to stand alone and everybody else is just a fool, not listening because they're not trying to build something larger than themselves to challenge the world with. And it's just, to get to that point, they got to throw out logical fallacies and questionable sources. Like one of the fallacies that he was using with Lucia, because I really want to get into what he said about Rick Kittles, because that was really deceptive. But with Lucia with a Z, the oldest American skeleton found, did a reconstruction of her, on her. And let me just show some pictures real quick. And what difference does it make? Australoid, Negroid. Hell, it could have been Caucasoid and still been of African descent, because Africa produces all that and has the oldest branch haplogroups. So you'd want to really look at the genetics, right? And let me pull up Naya. Naya was tested. Now Naya kind of had her reconstruction. I mean, you can only gauge so much by reconstruction. People have different takes. That's why I show different reconstructions of Lucia. But this right here, this is Naya. Naya had a haplogroup that was heavy with Native Americans. Lucia's haplogroup hasn't been tested. And that's another thing. When we're talking haplogroups, and let me also say this, like, well, two things I want to say at once. Haplogroups have existed for a while to identify migration patterns and everything. So it's bigger than Rick Kittles. Now, he could have made a case that the reason why they aren't testing Lucia is because she looks like an African. I don't know why they haven't tested her. They haven't tested her. They've tested other people. They do seem kind of selective with where they test. And I've heard people who are Native Americans themselves that'll say they think Africans were here before Columbus, and that genetic testing selection are janky. But that isn't the case that he's making. The case that he's making is that because this person looked Negro and that people were later labeled Negro, that this person is the Negro. This person is that de facto Negro that you descend from. And really, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't hold up to snuff because you're labeling something after the fact without evidence of who they're related to. You don't have any genetics, and when you do have genetics on like Pacific Islanders, they're more distant from Africans than just about anybody else on the planet. Native Americans are very different. Chinese, very different. So appearance doesn't mean that those are our folk ancestors, which is something that he told Sonnetter. That is his case, that these are your ancestors, that Luzia is your ancestor. No genetic evidence, all kinds of evidence when it comes to genetics that shows that people who might look like her are not necessarily related to the common African American when the genetic test is done. Now, if he wanted to say that the African signature that you get from genetics was here before and it just isn't wholly mixed and it got recombined when slaves were brought here, that's the type of case I would have made, and that's a parsed out case based on details, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? But he's making an absolutist case. And because he's making an absolutist case, he has to throw up conspiracy when it comes to genetics, and he's doing it dishonest. When he says Rick Kittles, and I'm quoting him directly because I've heard this a bunch of times, I listened to this. He said Rick Kittle says 0.1% of your blood goes back to 5 or 6 countries in Africa. He's trying to say this intentionally, and if it's not intentionally, then this is out of ignorance, and it's ignorance pushed by pride to win the argument instead of actually being right. And it's also, I'd say it's more dishonest than that, because Rick Kittles is one person who's saying that, and let me get to why that's out of context, because it's not incorrect. But Rick Kittles will go into detail on how you can learn about your lineage by taking an ancestry test. The 0.1% of your blood, look, almost all of us, all of our genetic mutations predates Homo sapien. So very little of it predates the split of Homo sapiens, which is where we identify, because we can only identify what's different by modern population groups, which we then relate to our creations when it comes to race. So you don't need more than 0.1% of your blood. And then saying that it goes back to 5 or 6 countries in Africa, most of it does, but that goes around. I mean, like I have Kenyan and Ethiopian and Sudan, and then you don't know where these countries traveled. I mean, these tribes traveled from, even though it might go to a tribe. Like I also have strong, very West Coast Africa, Guinea-Bissau, which I would suspect is Balanta. That might be the strongest connection I have. So, and another thing, you can't make the argument that DNA is a hoax when it's verifiable, because I've never taken a DNA test and gotten back like you are a penguin, your haplogroup is W6, you're from Antarctica, you're female. Everything gets the species right, gets the sex right, and gets the location. They won't just tell you you're an African, they'll tell you you are an African American, and you're mostly related to people in Jamaica, Haiti, Colorado. So because it tells you, the DNA tests do tell you that you're an American, your angle should be that a more likely conspiracy would be that pre-Columbian markers are ignored. African pre-Columbian markers are not reported. You can make that case because I've seen a couple examples of that, and I've heard people, like I said, I've heard Native Americans make that case. I've heard Mexicans make that case. So that's it. I'm gonna sum it up right there. 30-minute video. And that's it. I'm just gonna say, hey, indigenous 0, Africans 1. You lost this round, and it's because you're trying to stand on, and it may be related to self-hate to take such an absolutist approach to say that Africans are not your ancestors, to come up with this DNA conspiracy, which you could prove. You can prove what DNA is about. You know what I mean? You can take multiple tests. I've taken multiple tests, and I get generally the same conclusions. They're going to be different based on what type of test you're taking and the population database. But they are generally close. Get 23andMe and just get GADmatch, and you'll see that. So, see ya.